Fetishizing the often complex technological image generation by computer and microphotography focuses the work on the configuration of absence in a vulnerable sphere of intimacy.
Indeed, his hats can be characterized as three-dimensional still lifes, suspended in an imaginary zone in which all their references to the art world, to popular culture, and to real life itself, if such a thing exists, come together in a pastiche kaleidoscope.
The artist's recent paintings enact a more elusive, interpretative game. They expose both the tyranny and spuriousness of constructed identities.
Listen. They want a 52 state bronze bowler work. Yes, across the states. Monumental. No. It'll be a successful current work in the Neo-Christus modus. It will sustain an absolutely non-trivial sense of the totemic.
basic conceit at work here is that the terms figure and ground, cancelled, mirrored and restated within the logic of Graumasser's square, will bear significant conceptual results. But in this deliberately low hang, the very cancellation of the terms of this dichotomy reinforces their power. Indeed, the whole history of postmodernist painting is represented here in terms of the re-emergence, exhaustion, and reinvention of the modalities of figure and ground. Now, we have created and thoroughly tested generic standards for first-line artists and middle-line curators. Art is not a static process, so all standards are continually reappraised. The process of creating a standard is necessarily complex. It involves extensive research, asking detailed questions of thousands of artists and critics all over the art world to identify the key roles of artists, the levels of performance dealers expect, the knowledge, understanding and level of effectiveness artists and critics need to perform competently. The art standard framework is based on 4 key art functions: managing production, finance, art people, and art issues, Critical competence is proven to increase the effectiveness of the artists in the studio through matching performance to the best practice models which form the basis of the national competence standards for artists. It offers a chance for an in-depth reflection on experience and current art performance in all spheres. Rather than desire, the agenda of most of the paintings and sculptures in this marvellous mixed show is the staging of an advanced sexuality, either for oneself or for others. A painting of quality is one that uses embellishment, degradation, and decoration to generate complex visual malapropisms out of erasure, the scrotumization of vision, unabashed scenarios of seductive plasticity, displays of headwear competence and incompetence, intended or otherwise. The hat-head dialectic is not the same frame of reference as the figure-ground opposition.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But is the anxiety expressed in many of the works tempered by a poetic that provides an ultimately humanist and optimistic critique of society? What is their meaning? What is their value? What is their added value? It's a mark of his confidence, knowing what he has to do and how to do it. If attitudes win deals, then he'll skate it. I'm enough of a psychologist to know he won't freeze on the night. He's a good worker, has superb vision, a large nose, and outstanding stamina. What separates him from the rest is his balance. No matter where he ends up, he's always in a position where he throws a shot. When he's not in the studio, he enjoys the solitudes of long walks in the city. That's what makes a crucial difference to his mindset. Do you always wear natural layers of neutral tones? I draw an awful lot of figures for the model. I say to dealers, do you want to show my figure drawings? They say, no, you're a banker. You don't want to show them. It'll muddle people. Have you tried tight-knit ribbed jersey wear with loose linen Oxfords? My artwork now admits the exploring body and mind into the equation, but it's free of the playfulness that irritated the critics of my earlier work. I dream of a 100-piece retrospective in Tokyo.
favor gravel distribution. Yeah, gravel distribution. I know what you're thinking. I favor gravel distribution. The yield on British gravel more than covers risks of trouble with the regulators. This is the gravel scatter principle at work. Gravel scatter principle. You get buy papers and packaging, raw materials, you forget it. Look, Unit Trust is the best way into Japan at the moment. Pacific Rim and Tokyo offer broad exposure. They do. I'm telling you, short-term rates aren't good news for equities. They are not good news. Even given a current year, PE multiple of 14 and 4.4% yield. I'm telling you, P perfect. Sell P perfect. Aaron Energy, Domingo, and sell P perfect. That's what I suggest. Forget it. I tell you, buy paper, forget it. Raw materials prices are already factored. Well factored into share price. We'll be seeing some late Aaron Energy. I favor gravel distribution.
Big W's funding never really ceased. It's still receiving $3 billion a year in the American government's cultural budget. It's simply renamed as Spending for Sculpture Projects Advanced Art Systems. LSFSSR, Large Sombreros for Seven Rivers, believes that at a cost of $5 billion, it could deploy an alpha sombrero system on the Seven Rivers within 6 months. LSFSR tests last August used a 13-foot mirrored sombrero light enough to be launched into space and with a coating so reflective it needed no cooling. Big W is trying to suggest that the Seven River series would be inherently leaky against a concerted art critical attack. We say that it could be a cost-effective, preemptive, anti-critical system.
You've done what investors dream about and beaten the professionals at their own game. Despite operating in a falling stock market, your wheeling and dealing means the £10 million art fund is now worth more than £500 million. By combining art and business, you have created new mechanisms and methods in financial services, all forecasting massive profits, heralding new areas of expansion for First Chemically Correct. That's why we're sending you to New York to oversee the implementation of the most important operation First Chemically Correct has been involved in. Bowlers across America. In the mid-1980s, Mr. A was active in numerous so-called activist groups protesting against the deployment of American critical theory and German rhetoric in Western Europe. The collapse of the Berlin Third Wave has proved that conceptualism is not freedom, and minimalism does not necessarily bring prosperity. In October 1988, Mr. A declared that he would oppose any art modernization by the Alliance so long as Arto did not agree to a comprehensive concept of de-documentization. A year later, Mr. B distanced himself from his Western allies during the Bahrain Biennale. Mr. B vetoed sending Spanish artists to this event. When in September 1990 the British government asked the Spanish government to sell them some of their art to prevent their artists running out of ideas in the Gulf, the Spanish government, with the present Mr. C, Arto Secretary General, as its Vice President, stated that Spain refused giving absolute priority to a diplomatic solution to the Biennale conflict. The point is that the artist of the photo works is neither the fastidiously ironic, nostalgic ironist, nor the Proustian ponderer, any more than he is the recondite poser of iconic puzzles. The Wittgensteinian analytic trend predominated in his pre-1980 work. Thereafter, the emphasis in his oeuvre shifted towards the sculptural articulation of architectural space. The artist is, of course, acutely aware that certain cultural anthropologists consider tartan plaid to embody the modernist ideal of abstraction with a social access. He knows perfectly well, of course, that the majority of consumers of flannel suits do not see the plaid as ideologically uninflected.
Sorry to bother you, but do you have a minute? Do you plan to stand for Prime Minister? Do you plan to stand for Prime Minister? Sorry to ask you again, but can you please respond to that question? Can we initiate a bidding war for this piece? Will Chemically Correct buy into this one? Do you plan to stand for Prime Minister? Sorry to ask you again, but can you please respond to that question?
Having been invited to set up a think tank, I took it upon myself to instigate an architectural competition for the design of a think tank, or a new pavilion for Parliament. And here are the 4 finalist designs. The American entry was, believe it or not, based on a pork pie hat, but ended up looking more like a Melton Mowbray pie and end. I was really impressed by the German building, based on a boot mark, apparently first cast in the mud flats of the Zambezi. It's an enormous transportable think tank which leaves an impression wherever it goes and generates an enormous amount of work for sculptors casting the energy marks left behind. I think the French entry, a horizontal berry pivoting on a pin, was amusing, the idea presumably being that the ideas for the inner berry would be emitted centrifugally. However, visually I found it rather dull. Finally, the Great British Entry, a breathtaking ensemble of hat, pipe and cigarette lighter, a building which, with its daring casualness and intelligent response to the activities it will house, will take us with style, brio and wit into the 21st century. In my opinion, a masterwork.
It's always been my desire to build visions of sensuous delights, palaces of pleasure, towers of learning, schools of thought, always, though, based on the commonplace. I'm extremely fond of the shape of disposable cigarette lighters, and the elliptical squash tube is a recurrent form in many of my major buildings. There is a strong, if faintly loopy, sociological undertow to my work. My new scheme, for example, for a media park in Cologne includes an on-site tomato farm, because I believe all office workers should eat fresh tomatoes for lunch. It's good for them. And my use of post-tension concrete in the council chamber of the Hôtel du Département has, as its rationale, an attempt to make the building virtually proof against demolition. I believe places where decisions are made should be permanent to remind politicians of their mistakes. That is why the tank has to be sited in Trafalgar Square, the most central and prominent position in London.
Right, well, I think if we could start, it's about 4 minutes past 2, and I think we've got a lot of business to get through. So please take your seats with the utmost care, and could we start by touching base and explore our response to the working draft of the new company clear desk policy?
May I make a suggestion here? I mean, do you think it would be an appropriate time to switch on the wind machine at this moment?
I'd like to come back to that later, actually. If I can be absolutely clear about it, I'd rather we didn't switch it on at the present,
Right.
because I think it could confuse the issues. And again, I would like to emphasise that we are dealing here with a working draft, not with a policy that has been approved within the institution. So, I would like to suggest that staff should now be expected to maintain a clear desk policy throughout the working day. This will quickly improve efficiency and enable us to get up and running quickly in the event of a terrorist attack. The guidance is quite complex on this matter. For instance, the placing of a chocolate biscuit, and we haven't ascertained whether that's a plain chocolate or a milk chocolate biscuit, placed face down, so to speak, between May and August, carries 4 points for every 5 minutes it is left on the table surface. A plain biscuit, however, carries 2 half points for the same time. On the other hand, a cup of coffee in a plastic beaker left overnight on a transparent desk surface carries 21 penalty points. But if we can think about another particular item that we have to take into account and bring into the frame, a glass cup left empty only carries a 16-point penalty.
That's a clear distinction.
What about tea? What about tea in the cups?
Again, I think that we have to look at subsections of this drafted policy statement in order to understand implications in relation to substances other than coffee. But they are being drafted. I'd like to reassure you of that.
This is an historic day for the economy of this country. This great think tank of ours has already become a symbol of recovery, an alternative to the stale old wrangling of confrontational politics. Once again, this puts us in the league of the big players, the international marketplace, working with world-class intelligence and forecasting capabilities and access to world-beating competitive advantage scenarios. Financial markets will hang on our predictions for currency and interest rate movement. And now, an anonymous organization has purchased the tank. This means that a huge national asset has been added to the private sector. This is one of the biggest coups so far for the Exchequer. And the whole piece goes on as a major installation cum performance masterwork into the national collection, to be housed in the Bankside Power Station.